Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney or Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends, again, was never going to become my catchphrase. I just said that a couple times and it stuck. Um, I have a lot to talk about today, and then I still have a lot to talk about in the next video before we get to the big boy novel that most people, even if they don't really know that much about the EU, know about, and I think you know what I'm talking about. But that is not yet. There's a lot that happens, surprisingly, within 6 months before Return of the Jedi. So, starting with, we have a bunch of short stories to quickly go over. We have Slaying Dragons by Angela Phillips, and you can find this in the collection of short stories, Tales of the Empire. Now, the Tales of the Empire series and Tales from the New Republic are not like the other Tales books that I've discussed before because they collected from insiders and gamer and the adventure journals, because the adventure journals were these RPG things that you could use with short stories in it to help you flesh out your characters or whatever. And so they would just pluck stories from that because they're kind of out of print and put them into books, which was nice for people that didn't collect it otherwise. But that's where you can find it. And it's basically just about a slicer. Now, a slicer is essentially a computer like hacker whiz. The only notable one that I can even think of that you might know about is in the Thrawn trilogy. Talon Card has a worker, I guess, not a henchman. It's a bad guy term. He has an employee. Even still, he's like a, I don't know what the word is for it, but he has somebody in his employ that can hack stuff, and his name is Gent, and he's a slicer. But anyway, that's what this story's about. It's fine. It's just this girl. She's really good at slicing things. She's friends with this mechanic or whatever. And something about the Empire. I'm gonna be honest, I kind of forget because that was like a few days ago now. But it was fine. The Longest Fall by Patricia Jackson. You could also find this from the Tales of the Empire collection. Patricia Jackson. If you've been following my videos, I don't really care for Patricia Jackson, so I actually enjoyed this one. Oh, you thought I was going to say something negative. No, because, I'll give credit where credit's due. This story was pretty interesting. This Imperial officer made a judgment call and did not kill rebels. He ended up killing Imperial citizens. And so now he's going to face the consequences of his mistake. And who should appear in this short story? Somebody we haven't really heard about in a little bit, which is Inquisitor Tremaine. So it's actually a pretty good short story. I recommend that one. In Adventure Journal number 9, we have a short story titled Firepower. It is a short story essentially about neutrality. This girl or guy, I don't remember, they don't want to join the rebellion because, it's the classic tale of, well, if we're rebelling, we're gonna get, in further trouble, and I'm better off just minding my own business, living my life, and how you can try that all you like, but when you got an evil empire, no matter how neutral you try to be, they bring the fight to you. In Adventure Journal number 10, which is kind of a continuation of the story, we have Desperate Measures. It just kind of continues off of the last story with the same characters. But one interesting note is Farlander is mentioned here, which is really cool. Moving on, we have now, for what we'll be in for the next two videos, the old classic Marvel comics from the 70s to 80s. Yes, we're back at it again with issue 50, baby. This is the only Marvel series to have gone 100 issues, or only Star Wars. Not sorry, that's a lie. There's been a lot of comics that have gone past 100 issues. This is the only Star Wars comic series that has gone past 100 issues. The most issues we got out of a series was in Star Wars The Republic, which we had 83 issues. But most of them, like the Legacy comics or the KOTOR comics, are about 50 issues. So we've reached that point, and we still have so much more to go through. But with issue 50, it's a double-sized issue because it's the big 50th issue, right? You wanna hype that up. So it's basically the size of 3 issues in one issue. So it's probably a pretty meaty little comic book there, kind of more of a graphic novel. And so Luke is sick with some sort of crimson virus, and there's no way to save him. We later find out that the sister of Baron Tag, the ones from the early Marvel issues, has come to seek vengeance, and this is her way of doing it by spreading this disease. And of course, she gets stopped, but we need to figure out how to stop this. So, here's the thing. It's issue 50. You want to go big. You want to go hard. But you are classic Marvel writers during an era where Han Solo is frozen as carbonite. And because the EU was canon, they remained consistent with that. If it was just fan fiction, they would have just brought Han Solo back and not cared about what was going on in the movies. But because it's a part of the universe, they were like, well, we can't put Han in it because he's frozen in carbonite right now. So what do? Well, we have Chewie tell a story, have a flashback to an earlier mission with Han Solo and him, so you can bring Han Solo back because it's the 50th issue and you want everybody, and then you can kind of get through that backstory a way to save Luke. There you go. Then you got all the main players. Of course, it would have been nice to have them all actually together, but with the time period it's placed in, it's just impossible to do so. It is decent though. Issues ooh, I'm sorry. Wait a second. Oh. Guys. Hold on a second here. Did I talk about the last video? I think I did. About the earlier Marvel issues. I sure freaking hope so. Because I did not enjoy those earlier Marvel issues. I'm gonna keep going. If I didn't talk about that, ooh, you know what? I legitimately don't remember if I talked about it. Kind of ruined my whole flow. Basically, issues 45 to 49 I don't like. That's the gist of that. But yeah. Issue 51 to 52 is Tarkin. So in this, we deal with the Tarkin weapon. This is a minor super weapon that is being used for nefarious purposes. Now, the reason that this was mainly used was an excuse to get Luke there. That's what Vader wanted, but of course Luke escapes. Now, why was another weapon being made if the Death Star was being made? Now, Matt Wilkins brings up an excellent point. Why wouldn't the Emperor purposely create some other thing so that way the rebels could be like focused on destroying that and have the trail to the second Death Star that's still being rebuilt right now not be touched? So that way they can, do that in secret and not worry about their new one getting blown up. So to me, that makes sense. But before we continue on with the Marvel Comics, we have a short story by Ryder Wynnum called Vader Adrift. This is after issue 52 of the old classic Marvel, where Vader's drifting in space and he sees a clone trooper from the Clone Wars that was commanded by General Skywalker during the Clone Wars. But by the end of the story, the trooper, one of the last remaining freaking clones, kicks the bucket. And I won't necessarily spoil how it ends, but it was a really nice little one. And it wasn't necessary. Basically, Ryder Wynnum was tasked with writing just a short story with Darth Vader. And this is the beauty of the Expanded Universe writers. He could have made any generic story with Darth Vader. People would have ate it up because it's Darth freaking Vader, Anakin Skywalker. People just buy it. If it has Darth Vader in the name, they buy it. That's what people do because it's Darth freaking Vader. But he's like, but what can I do with this? How can I connect this to other things? And so he connects it to the old Marvel comics. I mean, this is the dedication that the EU writers have. You won't find it in the new canon, not to this extent, right? There was no need to do this. There was no need to go that deep for a short story, but he chose to because he loved the expanded universe, and that is why Ryder Wynnum is so utterly based. Anyway, moving forward, we jump way ahead real quick because chronologically it takes place around here, is issue 86. This is probably one of the best issues of all of the classic Marvel comics. There is a striking and super famous cover art for this issue, which is a stormtrooper holding Leia's hand as she's dangling over a cliff. Here's a couple things to mention. This is the first comic that introduces the Yinchuri. The Yinchuri being a big deal for half of the prequel politics going on in the expanding universe to help flesh out the prequels. In the prequels, there's this whole Yinchuri crisis, you know, and that's a whole thing talked about in Darth Plagueis and Cloak of Deception. It's talked about all throughout the prequel era. There's even a comic book with Darth Maul and stuff that has the Yinchuri crisis kind of talked about in a comic form. So, looks like a 4-issue comic, but it's called the Jedi Council Acts of War. This is where you actually get to see the Yinchuri crisis. But that was really cool. It's also I think the first of these comics to be written by Randy Stratley. Randy Stratley is a pretty big guy also, so that was pretty cool. But basically, and this story's been kind of done. I've seen this elsewhere in the expanding universe, but I believe this is the first time something like this was done, because I also saw this a little bit in Rebel Force. It's kind of touched upon in Razor's Edge and a couple other places, but I think this is the first, and I gotta be honest, it was done the best, which is Leia meets a stormtrooper that is from Alderaan, like an Alderaanian. And this whole story was just so good. Leia's still struggling with grief over Han being missing, over entire people being missing. Well, not missing, they're dead. Han's just missing. But she's dealing with all this, and she meets a man, one of her only other people, right? You know, and they're fighting and bickering about what they should do, and by the end of it, he finally is convinced that, yeah, you're right. And then the ending. And it was just a beautiful comic. Definitely worth your time. Issues 53 to 54. Leia's still dealing with grief over many things. Emotions are complicated. And so she crash lands on this planet with a bunch of hulking strong men. They look like freaking He-Man for some reason. The Imperials show up, and there's this Imperial officer named Score, or Scar. He's this big hulking alien, and it's like, what? This is a contradiction, because the Imperials are racist against other species. True, except that we have plenty of precedents. We have Thrawn himself. We have this one lizard dude that was in one of those early comics of Star Wars. So there's precedence for there being aliens in the Imperial Army, so long as they are useful. So he's here, and he's doing stuff, and that gets taken care of, and it's not the best, but it's there. It's next chronologically. Issue 55 is the Planet of Hoojibs. Yes. Basically, this is where the Rebels will establish their new base for basically the rest of the Marvel comics. You know, so that's cool. The Hoojibs are basically these cute little creatures. They're like, hey, you can stay and build a base on here if you help us kill these predators. Which, you know, luckily this is in Star Trek. Matt Wilkins also referenced this. This would completely go against the Prime Directive. I mean, sure, they're cute and cuddly, but just because a species looks scary, I mean, lions can look scary, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should just go out murdering them. They go, oh, hey, cool. You'll give us the base if we help you kill your predators? Sure, let's just obliterate them all. No problem. Like, where's the bad guy? We'll go and shoot. Like, come on, guys. Like, maybe question this a bit more. But it is what it is. Um, so that's it. It's basically just we established where they're gonna have their base from now on, since Hoth was taken away from them. Issue 56 to 63 is where this series goes back to being the greatest based classic Star Wars of all time again. So issue 56 and 57 basically, Lando Calrissian returns to Cloud City to take it back, baby. And so he does. We also get some cool Lobot stuff in here. Lobot's cool to me, so I'm glad he gets some time to shine here. We also, in this issue, get introduced to a very big character, which is Shira Bree. If you don't know who Shira Bree is, Wikipedia exists. For those of you who don't want to know, I'm not going to tell you. Just notice when you read that comic issue that she's very important. Moving ahead to issue 58 to 59, they do some missions. It's, the only important thing is that Shira kind of pops up throughout both these issues. So she's kind of becoming like this main character. And that's only to set her up as her big arc, because, of course, in comic books, if they introduce a character and they appear more than once, they're probably going to have some sort of arc, is what I've noticed. Issue 60, we get Shira Bree's backstory. Kind of. Not really. I won't go elaborate further than that for the sake of that issue. But helps my points with Legacy of the Force. I'll say that much. Oh my goodness. Then we get to issue 61. Luke is on this mission with Shira Bree and other Rogue Squadron leaders or members trying to blow up this Imperial thing, and then the Imperials do this thing to where they can't talk to each other or sense each other through the ships, because they're using TIE fighters to kind of trick the Empire or whatever. And so Luke doesn't have access to any of the technology to figure out what he should be doing, so he uses the Force to guide him to shoot at something. And so he shoots at what the Force is telling him is an enemy, and that turns out to be Shira Bree. And issue 62 begins, and Luke is being chastised by all of his, because as far as his friends are aware, he just murdered somebody. Murdered one of their allies. And so he's shunned. He has to leave the base. He has to go figure out what's going on, and he learns the truth in issue 63. If you don't want spoilers, now's probably the time to go. But I can't quit here. So this is your last warning. Shira Bree was a double agent. She was working for Darth Vader. She is actually somebody who's been raised up in the Empire because she had special training. I'll say this because I don't think any of the books really talk about it too much, but she is in fact an Emperor's hand, much like Mara Jade is. She is one of them. And so she, Luke learns the truth. He's able to provide that truth to the Rebel Alliance, so now they're all peachy. But at the end of the comic, Darth Vader has Shira Bree in a Bacta-tank, and he has plans for her. What are those plans? Will we find out? Well, unfortunately, we won't see or hear about what happens with that till after episode 6 concludes. But that's pretty much it, guys. These comics, this was peak greatness. The moment that Lando went to Cloud City, moving forward, it just never stopped. It was banger after banger after banger. So freaking good. These comics, it has its duds, I gotta be honest. And it's not gonna appeal to everybody. Some of it is some big cheese. Like, you gotta swallow a lot there, because some of it's just like, but that's why it's S-canon, so you can kind of take what you want, leave what you don't. This comic arc is important regardless if you like these comics or not. Do recommend these specific arcs in between episode 5 and 6, because for the very sole purpose that her legacy lives on, way past the movies. We will see this character again in 40 ABY when Jason Solo is like 30. So, I mean, this is like a large reaching, unintended, of course. Nobody expected this character to become somebody who would, survive for that long. But that being said, she ends up being one of the longest running arcs in all of the expanded universe. You'll probably forget about her by the time she shows up again after, her next appearance. And then you're like, oh, fudge, she's still around. And you'll be like, yeah, that's crazy. So, anyway, a lot of fun. Highly recommend. I'm going to finish the rest of these Marvel comics that take place before episode 6. And until then, guys, may the Force be with you.